One night, completely out of the blue, the doorbell rings. When you open the door, you are surprised to see a young girl on your doorstep. She speaks with a strange mechanical tone.
Can I come in?
You are immediately gripped by fear, and then you notice her unnatural black eyes staring right through you. Hey guys, welcome to my channel Mystery Inquest. My name is Veronica and I make true crime and mystery videos. If that is something that you are into, then please subscribe and tickle the notification bell. Okay guys, today's story is about the legend of the black-eyed children. Because it's almost Halloween and I feel like this story fits the right kind of spooky. Plus, personally, I need a little break from the gruesomeness of true crime, especially after last night's Jeffrey Dahmer video. Grab your cushion, get your pooch, get comfy, and let's start at the beginning. The black-eyed children usually come to a person's home or a car, they knock on the door, and they demand to be let in, and anyone who comes into contact with them feels an intense sensation of fear. These creepy children are generally between the ages of 6 and 16, and they appear completely normal except their totally blacked out eyes. Some of the children were reported to be wearing some old-fashioned clothes, as if they traveled through time. Other than that, they appear to be ordinary children, which is part of what makes them so frightening. They will not harm you though, but only if you don't let them in. Many people who have heard of the black-eyed children believe them to be just a myth, but there are some people out there that claim to have seen them. Comment below, you guys, if you have seen them. Okay, now let's look at some of the eyewitness testimonies. The most known eyewitness testimony comes from Brian Bethel, a Texas reporter who described encountering two black-eyed boys in Abilene, Texas in 1996. He reported that one night when he was in his car at a movie theater parking lot, two boys approached him by knocking on his car window. The reporter rolled down his window, and as he did, he was immediately gripped by this irrational fear, but he couldn't understand why. They were just kids. The older boy explained that he and his brother just wanted to see a movie, but first they needed to go home to get money, and they asked Bethel if he would give them a ride. The reporter thought it was so weird, but then the boy reassured him that it would only take a few minutes and that they were only kids. And worryingly, the boy added that they had no gun with them. I don't know about you guys, but this would really freak me out for sure. Like, why are you mentioning a weapon? Oh gosh. Bethel must have felt the same way, especially when he realized that the movie the boys wanted to watch had already begun, and he told the boys that the movie would be nearly over by the time he could drive them home and back. And then he made a proper eye contact with one of the boys and then the other. He froze with fear. Their eyes were completely black. The older boy became irritated when Bethel made excuses for not giving them a ride. He was like, "Come on, man, say that we can get in the car, please. We can't get in unless you say it's okay." When Bethel heard this, he didn't hesitate any longer and he just bolted from the parking lot. He still stands by his account to this day. Another testimony is called The Black-Eyed Girl of Cannock Chase. This sightings brings us to Staffordshire, England. In September 2014, reports of a black-eyed girl terrorizing the town of Cannock Chase began appearing in the tabloid newspaper, the Daily Star. The case was investigated by Lee Brickley, a paranormal investigator. He stated that a local woman had heard a horrific cry. She thought it was a child in distress, and so she ran to find the kid. After a while, she spotted a white-clad girl standing behind her. The lady said that the small child was silent and she was covering her eyes with her hands as if, quote, she was waiting for a birthday cake. The lady, who was accompanied by her own little daughter, asked the girl if she was okay. At this point, the little girl removed her hands from her face and opened her eyes. The witness said to Brickley, quote, "That's when I noticed that her eyes were entirely black, no iris, no white, nothing. I jumped back and grabbed my daughter. When I looked again, the child was gone. It was so strange." End quote. Brickley also told the media that his aunt had seen the same girl in 1982, which was almost 30 years ago. He claimed that his aunt heard a small child yell for help before witnessing a girl dressed in white fleeing from her. Brickley's aunt caught up to her and put her hand on her shoulder to check on her. The girl turned around and Brickley's aunt saw that the girl's eyes were absolutely black. The terrifying girl then turned around again and ran away. There was a video captured from a drone flying above the fields of Cannock Chase, and it was uploaded to YouTube in April 2015. Some speculate that the drone mistakenly captured a weird girl clad in white and matching descriptions of the Cannock Chase black-eyed girl. Oof, you guys, this is so spooky. It's so bizarre to me that all of these stories are kind of the same. There might be something about it, you guys. The next story is a personal account from a girl who wrote this story on Reddit. So I'm gonna just read what she said because this is like really creepy, you guys. I have been raised in Florida my whole life from Orlando to Miami, and this took place in Orlando, in a neighborhood I lived in since I was a child. Nothing like this has ever happened before in that area, paranormally related, a lot of crime though. I'm starting college now, and this happened in 8th grade summer going into 9th grade. I was at my old friend's house who lived in the same neighborhood. It was a very sunny day and we hung for a bit, and I started making my way back early afternoon. I think it was like around 2 p.m. and not even 5 minutes into my walk, a small boy approaches me. He was wearing jeans and a green polo shirt that had a symbol on the corner like a polo shirt would, so I thought he was from an organization. He handed me a card, but when I looked at him, there it was, the black eyes. They were all black completely. I was taken back so much I took like 2 steps back, and mind you, there was no one around whatsoever at all. But as soon as I got startled and realized he had black eyes, an elderly black woman appeared on the opposite side of the street, staring at me. They both were. She had the same shirt on the boy did and pure black eyes too. Not that it matters, but I just never hear stories of black-eyed people being black, so I mentioned it for that reason. I feel like my experience was very unique. But back to the story, when I noticed her staring at me. This kid still tried to hand me the card, but he never said anything ever, and I don't know why, but I took it. And then my mom, out of nowhere, like a millisecond after I grabbed the card, comes speeding down the street because she knew I was at my friend's house, and she tells me to get in. I do because I'm scared, and she asks me if I'm okay once I'm in the car. She told me she had an extreme sense of peril and doom come over her out of nowhere at home, and she said she dropped everything and got in her car and sped to where I was at. My mother is spiritually gifted since she was a child. She's had paranormal things happen, also low-key psychic. She's a huge reason as to why I am the way I am. I love that woman. But she took me back home and I told her what happened, and she said we have to burn the car away from the house. And then she burnt it. And that was really it. Just a wild sort of a little life trip that happens sometimes. What do you guys think that was all about? I'm just lucky to have my mom, because if not, who knows what the F would have happened. Keep in mind, Florida is a hotspot for human trafficking, but that doesn't explain the pure black eyes they had. Okay guys, the next story is about a woman who actually let the black-eyed children in, and you will never believe what happened. The woman, who claimed to live in Vermont, said that in January 2015, during a blizzard, she heard a loud knocking on the front door of the house. She assumed that someone had been in a car accident and needed help. Just before she opened the door, she looked out of the window and saw a string of footsteps in the snow leading up to her house. She thought how strange it was because she didn't see any cars on the road. She was a little worried, so she woke her husband up and asked him to check it out. When he opened the door, he saw 2 children standing there. A boy and a girl looked to be around 8 years old, and they were definitely not dressed enough for the cold weather. A sense of dread came over the husband and wife, but despite the alarm bells sounding off in their head, the lady allowed the 2 children inside. She led them into the living room, and the family's cat started to act very, very strange around the children, with hair standing on their backs, and one cat in particular started hissing at them as they passed. The lady offered to make a cup of cocoa for the children, and they apparently always responded with a quote,
"Our parents will be here soon,"
end quote, to whatever she asked them. A few minutes later, the woman walked back into the room with 2 cups of cocoa, and as the kids glanced up to receive the cocoa, she realized with horror that the kids' eyes were jet black. She stood there frozen with fear, staring at the kids, unable to move, when they both suddenly got up and asked if they could use the restroom. The woman kept her cool and pointed them to the right direction. The lady then turned to look at her husband and saw that his nose began to bleed, and then the power went off in the whole house. The woman rushed to get a tissue for her husband when she spotted both children standing motionless in the hall just staring at her. They spoke robotically.
Our parents are here.
They then turned around and unblocked the front door and made their way outside. The kids then got into a weird black car, and there were 2 tall guys in suits standing next to it. Then they got into the car and drove away. The woman's husband was diagnosed with an aggressive form of skin cancer in the months after, and the woman began to suffer from nosebleeds and other symptoms, which she didn't describe in detail, but she said it's the worst condition of her life. The woman believes that the 2 black-eyed children somehow caused both her and her husband's illnesses. Oh my gosh, guys, this story really creeped me out. Please don't, whatever you do, don't open the doors to the black-eyed children. And if you already did, then do not. I repeat, do not let them in. Oh my gosh, this is by far, I think, the scariest. The next story, an unknown U.S. Marine told a strange tale of an encounter with black-eyed kids outside his quarters while he was stationed at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina in November 2009. The Marine said that he was alone in his room watching a movie one evening when he heard someone knocking on his door. The man opened the door expecting it to be his roommate who had forgotten his key. To his surprise, he was greeted by 2 young kids. For some reason, he was immediately overwhelmed with dread, and he felt compelled to slam the door shut as quickly as he could. And then he noticed the children's jet black eyes. He was so freaked out by this, but he still asked the kids what they wanted, and they replied while staring straight at him that it was cold outside and they just wanted to come inside and read. Now, this is so weird, guys. And as the children said that, they took 1 step toward the door. The Marine gave in to the impulse and quickly slammed the door into their faces. He just stood there as the kids kept knocking until finally, a few minutes later, all the noises stopped and the children appeared to have vanished. The Marine inquired about his bizarre meeting the next morning, but the few people who had been on site that night said they hadn't seen or heard anything. The next story, an Ohio man described an odd encounter with 2 black-eyed teens outside the data center where he worked in July 2010. It was 5 a.m. and Noatik was taking a break from his night shift and having a cigarette outside his building when he spotted 2 teenagers across the street. As soon as he observed them, he felt uneasy. They were just there, staring right at him, but were otherwise perfectly still. He quickly finished his cigarette and went back in, and then the doorbell sounded about 10 minutes later. Noatik looked at the monitor and saw the same 2 boys from earlier. He asked what they wanted, and they didn't speak. They only motioned for Noatik to come outside. He told them that he was busy and returned to his work. The weird thing was that the 2 boys continued to stare at the camera, but he just felt like they could see him, even though it was totally impossible. So after about 10 minutes, he went to the front door and told the boys to leave, and that's when he noticed, through the one-way glass door, that their eyes were jet black holes. But apart from that, they looked completely normal. This really freaked him out, but he decided to open the door anyway. So he opened the door and he told them to leave, or he would call the cops. One of the boys replied, quote, "That will not be necessary, sir. We simply need to use your phone. Will you let us in?" Noatik told him that he couldn't do that because nobody else was allowed to come in the building. The boys just kept asking over and over to come in, and at this point, Noatik took his phone out and threatened to contact the police again, and then he shut the door. Once he was safely inside, he continued to watch the pair. One of the boys just stood there and continued to stare into the camera, while the other teenager went to the back of the building, and then he stood in front of the back door camera. Oh my gosh, you guys. Finally, this was too much for Noatik, and he dialed 911, all the while keeping an eye on the monitors. And then, as if the youngsters knew what he was doing, they walked into a blind spot on the system security cameras and they just vanished. And when the police arrived at 6 a.m., the boys were nowhere to be found. Whoa guys, what do you think? Comment below if you have encountered the black-eyed children. What do you think they are? are. This is so creepy. I mean, I hope I will never ever meet black-eyed children. Okay guys, if you like this video, please smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and turn the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future awesome videos. And stay safe guys, and I'll see you next time.
I know you told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you